Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the SOG Knives Terminus XR. First off though, I want to thank my Patreon patrons who make it possible for me to just look at a random knife on the internet and say, yeah, I'm getting that for the channel. It's beautiful to not even have to think twice about it. Just double click, make the purchase, and then check it out. Thank you so much for that, patrons. You are giving me a wonderful gift. Well, every month, but still, appreciate it. Next thing, size comparison. This is actually a reasonably sized knife. Here it is against your Spyderco Delica. That's the round area rat number 2. This is a Spyderco Delica. Guys, it's been a long day. And then here it is against your Spyderco PM2 or Paramilitary 2. So you can see here, size-wise, this is actually kind of in a nice intermediate range. It's a good size for everyday carry. Keep that in mind, and let's go ahead and measure up the blade right quick while we're at it. Here we are coming in right around 3 inches here. So that's a beautiful thing. Next thing, SOG Knives. SOG is a company that I think a lot of folks know from multi-tools, right? They have not been, they definitely have made some knives in the past. They've made some good knives in the past, but for a while now, they've been sort of, well, you haven't seen too much of them on my channel. There hasn't been all that much interest in the higher-end knife world from SOG. But this little guy was recently released, and it's been making some waves in the gear community. My buddy Tony over at Everyday Commentary actually is the person who recommended this to me. I remember him talking on the podcast, Gear Geeks Live, check it out. Saying, you know, oh, I got this SOG in the other day, and it's really good. And I was like, what? Hold on. I'm sorry. Did you mispronounce something? SOG? No, and in fact, it is. So this little guy's been making waves in the knife community, and that's a beautiful thing. And so when a company that I haven't been paying much attention to starts doing great things, I absolutely want to check them out. And so let's go ahead and go into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting, very little knife here from SOG. So on the good side, to start with the blade. Start with the blade on this guy is reasonable. It has reasonably thin stock, which is a beautiful thing. And it comes down to a reasonably thin grind here. It is CTS BDZ1. This is not a steel I've spent too much time with, but Pete over at Cedric A to Gear and Outdoors put this steel using his knife tests in the vicinity of VG10 and 154 cm. All of those things are, so it's in that sort of, it's not an oh my god, oh, super steel, but it'll do. It's probably going to be just fine for everyday carry. So, there you go, there's your steel. Next thing, this guy is using a mix of what looks to be a carbon fiber overlaid on top of G10. So you can see here there's carbon fiber on the top layer, and then on the intermediate layer there's G10. In fact, you can see the boundary if you look at the edges right there. Yeah, so it's doing that same kind of carbon fiber G10 overlay that you'll get from other companies as well. So that's something to keep in mind. That's frankly, it does look handsome. I mean, it looks like carbon fiber, and then this gives it a little bit of extra texturing. No real complaints about that. I'd even go so far as to say it looks good to me. But I don't have that objection. A lot of people do. Next thing, takedown-wise, this was actually relatively straightforward. I mean, it's axis lock-like. Oh, actually, that is one thing I should probably mention. Well, I'll do that next. It has a relatively easy takedown. It wasn't too bad. And so I always appreciate that. This could have been made very weird, but it really wasn't. And the texturing on this handle is quite good. Is the other thing I should have mentioned when I was talking about the G10 there. Having all of these various cuts out, coupled with the relatively ergonomic design, makes this pretty easy to have stick in the hand. It's not really going anywhere, even if you are in the Vaseline factory. Which brings us to the next point I was just hinting at, which is that this is a variant of the axis lock knife. Now, of course, this is not an axis lock. I'm sure legally speaking, this absolutely is not an axis lock. However, the simple fact is that you've got a button here, which is capturing a post here, which is sliding up onto the back of the blade. This functions in many, many ways, much like the Benchmade axis lock did. However, of course, the patent on the axis lock expired in 2016, and so they're calling this the XR lock, and certainly, okay, whatever. But nevertheless, it has something that has the benefits of that axis lock. One thing that I will say is that this guy has, much like some of the Benchmades did at some point, but not all of them, when you pull this back, the blade starts to pop open, which makes this very easy to just kind of pop open with the lock itself. With a little bit of centripetal force here, you can get that blade the rest of the way out of there. But I do always appreciate when pulling the axis lock, or I'm sorry, the XR lock itself back, pops the knife at least part of the way open. That's kind of a nice thing. So that's a very good thing, and frankly, I think it's a good lock. It's a strong lock. We no real major issues with it. Well, one we'll talk about, but still. Next thing, price on this guy is pretty reasonable. We're coming in here about $70, which I think is in that solid mid-range to budgety area. No real major issues with it there. That's good. Next thing, this is a fully ambidextrous knife, and this is kind of a rarity for flippers, actually. Most flipper knives are either going to be liner lock or frame lock, but this guy is a fully ambi knife, because you have, as you can see here, a cutout for your XR lock, or a button area for it. Well, bar, whatever the heck this thing is, a tab for either side of your XR lock on both sides there, and then the clip can be reversed so that it hangs in either pocket there. You also have ambidextrous thumb studs if you want thumb studs for some reason. All of those things are completely, so this is a completely ambi knife. The experience for a lefty person is exactly the same as that for a righty person. No arguments there. And it's nice to have more flippers available in that domain. Then finally, the ergos on this guy are quite good. The SOG clip here, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of. We'll talk about that later, and there is a little bit of a hot spot off the tip of it here. I'd like to see them kind of curve the edge of the clip. So a lot of good clips will sort of flare the edge down at the end there. But still, on the whole, in the hand, this is quite good. It feels good, and you actually do have the opportunity, although it's not necessarily the thing I would do all the time, but you do have the opportunity to choke up a little bit using this guy here. So in the hand, no complaints whatsoever. So to me, this is all the good. It has got nice ergos, fully ambi, which is unusual for a flipper knife. The price is reasonable. The axis lock variant works well here. I'm sorry, XR lock. It's got a nice texture with a carbon fiber G10 mix. Takedown is not so hard, and it is a reasonable blade with a reasonable steel and reasonably well done. On the great side, to me, the action on this is quite good. So, look, there have been flippers with locks along these lines before. Benchmade used the axis lock in the Benchmade 300, which had a terrible action. It was brutally bad. This is a good action. This flips beautifully. Absolutely 100% beautifully. This also has a very nice closing action, because one of the advantages of a lock like this with a sliding bar is that you can pull this guy back and then just shoot the blade close using a little bit of centripetal force. Your fingers are never in the slicing path as you're closing the knife. It's just great. And so this is something that was not gotten right. The one time they tried to make an axis lock flipper, it didn't go well. And to see it done really well here by another company, oh man, do I like that. So this XR lock actually is providing a really great flipping action here. I love that they dialed that in, and that their very first one out of out of the cage, so to speak, they just nailed it. The action on this knife is really, really good. Even to a flipper snob, I do not object in any way to this flipper action. Can I miss a flip? Yeah, I can, I guess, but still, the action here is reliable. Never had an issue in practice. So, to me at least, that's what's great, is the action here is well done. On the bad side, they did completely miss the sharpening choil. You can see here the plunge grind extends out further than the sharpening choil does, and so you end up with this beard at the end there. Not a great thing. They need to expand that out a little bit further, but you could do that at home if you needed to. Next thing, this is not a terribly scented knife. You can see it is a little off to the side here. It's not a terrible thing. It's okay. It's not touching the sides or anything, but I'd like to see them kind of working on that. Next thing, this unfortunately, although of course this is not an axis lock, this is an XR lock, it does have one of the issues that the axis lock did have, which are the omega-shaped springs, which can very often actually break. If that little spring breaks, then this bar never, doesn't have the ability to slide back anymore, and so the knife doesn't lock closed. That's not a great thing. And so, unfortunately, by virtue of being similar to that other lock, it is inherited one of its weaknesses. I don't know whether they're using different spring steel. I haven't experienced the breakage there, but this does have a potential weakness there that is shared with that other design. So, that is something to keep in mind. Next thing, the thumb stud on this guy, honestly, I don't care for. I mean, you can use it to deploy it, but it isn't quite as nice. I don't know. I'm getting better at it as I've used it more, but I'm not really a huge fan of it. And honestly, this is such a good flipper knife, and you have the possibility to use the XR lock to pop the knife open itself. I kind of wish they'd just skip the thumb studs entirely. I think this knife would be a little bit more svelte had they done so, and frankly, a little bit more attractive. Not a big deal, and if you're a thumb stud person, you're going to freaking love it, but yeah, that's a thing. And then finally, the branded clip on this guy is a little bit obnoxious. Here, I'll show you exactly what I mean. Let's say that you are, the Colonel from Kentucky Fried Chicken. You're wearing your white linen suit out to a beautiful dinner, and sure enough, you are going to have SOG, 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 SOG screaming out of your pocket all freaking day long. Of course, you're probably not the Colonel from Kentucky Fried freaking Chicken, and therefore you are not wearing a white linen suit. However, nevertheless, you do have a very, very, frankly, frustrating amount of clip branding going on there. I wish this were a more subtle clip, and I do wish that this were bent down a little bit more in the corner there. So the branded clip is a little obnoxious, and to me that's bad. So all of that is the bad, is that the branded clip is obnoxious, the thumb stud is not super easy to deploy, the Omega springs are a weakness that is also found in the XR lock. It is not terribly scented, and they did miss the sharpening choil. On the ugly front, there are two ugly issues here. To start with, one of them is that the texture on the handle is the same on both sides, and that means that it is, it is unfortunately textured right under the clip here. In a lot of pocket knives, what you'll see them do is something like this, where, for instance, on this Spyderco Chaparral FRN here, they've put a less textured area right here under where the clip slides, which means that as you're sliding this guy into your pocket, you are not dragging the pocket material across this textured region. Unfortunately, here, they have these cutouts into the carbon fiber, a G10 sort of affair here. And what this means is that as you're pushing this into your pocket will be trapped and then released, trapped, released by each one of those individual grooves. So I really wish that they had just not textured this little area down here, and then that would have made this a great knife. I think, frankly, it wouldn't have been unattractive, but it also would have made this a lot easier to get into and out of the pocket. It's not a big deal, but it's one of those things that adds up because you're going to be unpocketing and pocketing this many, many times a day. Then finally, on the ugly front, the texture on this tab is too damn sharp. This is not something I appreciate. They've done a little tiny bit of edge breaking here, but especially, like, for instance, this very back here. I'll try and zoom in a little bit so you can see this carefully. This very back little area here, that's freaking sharp right there. This, in fact, this entire flipper tab just needs to be melted a little bit. It needs to be reduced. It needs to be smoothed over. And that would make it a much more compelling experience. Because as of right now, unfortunately, it is very sharp. And that means not only as it is pecking on things in your pocket is it going to do some real damage, but it also just means that, frankly, it's not comfortable to use. And it's to the point where you really like, ow, did that actually just cut me? And so they really need to knock that down. You can, of course, fix this at home with a good file. Just kind of knock that down in a variety of ways, but still, I'm not a big fan of that. And frankly, you could fix this as well, although sanding carbon fiber in G10 is not a joke. Make sure you're using protective equipment and whatnot. But still, not a big fan of those things. So those are the ugly things to me, is that the texture on the tab is too damn sharp, and the texture under the clip is not a great idea. Final conclusion-wise, look, I think this is actually a surprisingly good knife. Pardon me, I've been a little sick for a little while here. But this is surprisingly good. For a while here, SOG really hadn't made anything that didn't feel like it belonged in a blister pack. I mean, I joke, but in the knife world, generally speaking, you get like your hardware store knives that are going to be okay. They're tools, they'll work, but they're not super impressive to the knife community. They're okay for beating on, but nothing that would have caught the interest of myself, a knife connoisseur, a cutlery connoisseur, which is, of course, French for knife snob. But in short, I knew that SOG was out there doing good work, and in fact, SOG has a place in my heart because, you know, for the longest time, my father carried a SOG multi-tool. That was sort of, to me, the SOG tool is always going to mean multi-tool in my brain, and so it had made me a little bit sad that the company itself wasn't doing anything super interesting for a while there. But this here is a change of course. This is an interesting knife. This does not belong in a blister pack. Because here they are using materials that are worth a damn. They've implemented a lock that is relatively similar to a well-known lock, and they've done it quite well. The ergonomics on this guy are pretty excellent for righties or for lefties. The price is reasonable, and the action on it is downright good. This is a good action, especially for a knife using this lock. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, sure, this isn't a high-end thing, and it's probably not I don't know, the clip is obnoxious. It's got some things where it could be worked on, but honestly, and especially the texturing needs to be toned down on the clip, on the flipper tab here, but honestly, even though it's not a high-end knife, it's not a high-end price, so it's okay. It stacks up pretty well to the competition. In this kind of range, in the 60 to 70 buck range, you're looking at a lot of things like Civivi, out there, your Cold Steel, your Spyderco Delicas of the world, your CRKTs. And you know what? Honestly, it's running with the big boys in the game. I mean, I don't know that I would choose this over the Delica. Although, frankly, these days I would just send you to the FORN Chaparral. This is another $20, and, hey, whatever. But nevertheless, I think that this is an easily recommendable option in this price range. And I can see a future in which somebody would say to me, hey, Nick, I'm looking for a knife, and I might say, you know what? SOG Terminus XR, that's not a bad choice for you. This is a very, very nice little knife. And so mostly, I think more than anything, the important part about this knife, I mean, sure, it's going to be a fine knife for some people, but the more important thing for me is the message that SOG is sending here. Maybe I'm misreading this. Maybe this was just a shot in the dark that got really lucky, but I feel like this might be SOG sending the message that they are working to be taken seriously by the knife community. And indeed, I feel like this knife deserves to be taken seriously by the knife community. If this knife appeals to you in terms of its design, in terms of its mechanics, in terms of its idea, then absolutely this is a knife that's worth considering. Even if you are a cutlery collector, even if you are a big fan of the higher end stuff, this is a piece that is worth a damn. And so I'm really happy to see that. I'm glad to be getting that message. SOG, this is good. Well done, and you have my attention. And with a couple of easy fixes, this could be something really amazing. With a couple of little tweaks, the Terminus XR2, oh yes, you could have something great. But I think the most exciting thing with the Terminus here might be that this little Terminus marks the start of something very impressive out of SOG. So there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of the day. Bye now.